Neighbors say it was like a scene from a horror movie. Thousands of bees attacking an elderly man in the front yard of his home in suburban Fort Worth, Texas. Here's ABC's Jim Ryan.
The bees had built hives inside a tree. This woman found her 72-year-old neighbor on the ground.
There was clumped on his face.
She called 911.
I can tell that he was coming in and out of consciousness.
The man is in critical condition. His 77-year-old wife also was stung.
The wife was hospitalized as well. A new report points to multiple Secret Service failures in the attempted assassination of former President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania.
The bipartisan Senate report finds the failures at the Butler Farm Show were foreseeable and preventable. One county emergency services commander told the panel a pre-event walkthrough with Secret Service was incredibly disorganized and ended with the sense that there was really no plan. When shooter Thomas Crooks was first identified by law enforcement, word was never passed to the former president's detail, even as counter-snipers saw local police approaching Crooks with their guns drawn.
ABC's Stephen Portnoy. Thailand's king has signed a landmark marriage equality bill allowing same-sex couples to marry. It's the first such bill in Southeast Asia. It grants married couples full legal, financial, and medical rights, regardless of their gender. The bill takes effect in January. Pope Francis is recovered from a mild case of flu. He leaves for a visit to Luxembourg and Belgium tomorrow. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
You can live out your MasterChef dreams when you find a professional on Angie to tackle your dream kitchen remodel. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Inside to outside, repairs to renovations. Get started on the Angie app or visit Angie.com today. You can do this when you Angie that.
News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KVNU.
Good afternoon. We'll feel right in for Bill Walter with your KVNU News Update this hour. It's brought to you by Logan Extermination. Well, Utah State University officials say that local law enforcement are investigating after an alleged sexual assault occurred Sunday night in the Logan Cemetery. Now, the rape was reported Tuesday, prompting school administrators to issue an alert to students and faculty. According to the alert, the perpetrator was described as an adult male and a knife was used in the facilitation of the alleged crime. Now, it reportedly occurred at around 8 o'clock on September 22nd within the cemetery adjacent to the Logan campus. The Logan City Police Lieutenant Derek Dickey said they are aware of the reported incident since the cemetery is within their jurisdiction. The alleged victim had reportedly went to the Cache Valley Hospital after the rape occurred and received medical care. After discussing what took place with several friends, a report was made yesterday at the university's Title IX office, which then notified law enforcement. Now, Dickey said the alleged victim has not wanted to speak to police yet and asked for privacy. Investigators are respecting her wish and will be available to help when she is ready. USU officials said everyone on campus has a responsibility to make the community safe. They also stressed it is never possible to completely eliminate the risk of becoming the target of a crime, and a crime is never the fault of the victim. Well, coming up in just a minute, a juvenile has been arrested for allegedly vandalizing flags that were outside the Logan Pride Center. That as the news continues as we check your weather on the 6s, and a really nice afternoon today as we've enjoyed sunny skies. Temperatures have been in the mid-80s. Now tonight, we'll see clear skies continuing overnight as overnight temperatures will drop into the mid to high 40s and then be back into the mid-80s for tomorrow. High 80s coming for Friday and Saturday. And then low 80s for the first of next week. Well, don't forget, Cardell's Insulation brings you our weather on the 6s. You know, if you built your house before 1980, you should consider updating your insulation. Today's insulation is superior to what you'll find in older homes. And that's why you want to call Cardell's Insulation at 755-5012. Well, a 16-year-old boy is facing vandalism charges relating to the recent pride flag thefts at the Logan Pride Center. The Logan City Police Department reported that the male suspect was referred to juvenile court on theft and criminal mischief charges relating to the cutting down and stealing of the flags in front of the Logan Pride Foundation building. Now, both charges are being enhanced under the Utah hate crime statute. The suspect's identity is not being released due to the boy's age. Over the past several months, members of the Logan Pride Center have reported multiple flags vandalized or taken. Security camera video had showed two individuals on August 9th approach the center and cut down the two flags in the front yard before running away. Police expressed appreciation for the public's help identifying the individual. They say that there still remains one unidentified suspect, and they are continuing to investigate the crimes. And a recent report from the Government Accountability Office revealed that hundreds of thousands of students face significant challenges in securing financial aid due to a series of delays in the free application for student financial aid process known as FAFSA. Now, the updated version of FAFSA was released 90 days later than usual, causing a cascade of issues. Records were processed about 161 days late, and paper FAFSA forms experienced delays of more than 300 days. Now, as a result, the Government Accountability Office reports that submissions from high school seniors and other one-time applicants dropped 9% last year, while in Utah, FAFSA submissions from high school seniors were down about 10% from the previous year. I've got another check of local news coming up at the bottom of the hour. In for Bill Walter, I'm Will Feelright with your KVNU News Update.
Fall is the perfect time to landscape, and Canyon Landscaping is ready to build or transform your outdoor space. They bring your vision to life with expert care, including installing beautiful planting beds and crafting custom paver patios. They handle your entire project from start to finish, and they have the team to get the design just right. But hurry, spots are filling up fast. Visit canyonlandscaping.com or call 752-3838 today. Let's make your outdoor space a true extension of your home. Call Canyon Landscaping. Look for the leaf.
The station for news and talk. KVNU 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Fans of timeless Western music, mark your calendars for October 4th at 7:30 p.m. for the Sons of the Pioneers.
Drifting along with a tumbling tumbleweed.
Known for the rich harmonies and classic hits like Cool Water and Tumbling Tumbleweeds, the Sons of the Pioneers are returning to the Ellen Eccles Theater and bringing an evening of some of the most iconic melodies in American music history with them.
Cool water.
Get your tickets today at casharts.org.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your loved ones, you deserve the best. This is Matt Robbins with Quality First Insurance, an Alera Group company. We believe that obtaining life insurance should be affordable and worry-free. As an independent auto owners insurance agency, we work with top-notch carriers to find the best policy for your unique needs. You can rest assured that you're getting the best coverage and the best price. Quality First Insurance, 435-752-0101.
Join in the fun Saturday, September 28th for the second annual Center Street Giant Pumpkin Festival. This family fun event will run from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. on historic Center Street in Logan. This is an all-day fall celebration with Center Street coming to life with live music, food, art, children's activities, and lots of giant pumpkins on display as they fight for the title of Center Street Giant. For more info, go to centerstreetgiant.com or call 752-2345. Sponsored by Cache Valley Bank and Anderson Seed and Garden.
Overwhelmed by Social Security and Medicare options? October 2nd at 6 p.m., Adams Wealth Advisors and Senior Benefits Insurance Services invite you to a free seminar that'll simplify these crucial decisions. Experts Jaden May, National Social Security Advisor, and Sherry Crosby, licensed Medicare agent, will help optimize your Social Security benefits and help guide you through Medicare options and costs. October 2nd, 6 p.m., come learn your options with Social Security and Medicare. Go to adamswealthadvisors.com/SS to reserve your spot today. Understanding your options makes all the difference.
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Thursday on This Morning, America's First News, tracking Helene as the massive storm moves across the Gulf of Mexico. We'll examine the latest path and identify who's evacuating. Also, everyone knows difficult decisions have to be made regarding Social Security, yet nobody's brave enough to propose any fixes. And the industry is expected to hire after the Fed rate cut. Thursday on This Morning, America's First News. From 4 to 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM. Your station for news and talk.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Hour 2 of today's show. Oral arguments made before the Utah State Supreme Court today by the state and an attorney representing the League of Women Voters, Mormon Women for Ethical Government, and through amicus brief, the Better Boundaries organization behind Prop 4. Several years ago, voters approved via ballot initiative. Well, actually, let's back up because it matters. Hundreds of thousands of signatures from 26 of 29 counties here in Utah were collected by the Better Boundaries organization and volunteers. That's a lot of work. Took them about a year to get the Proposition 4 question on the ballot. And the question was, would you like to create an independent redistricting process here in Utah? Independent meaning lawmakers with re-election concerns wouldn't be the sole part of drafting the maps, that this independent committee would be convened and they would draw maps and then lawmakers would choose from the maps they recommended. Well, a majority of voters in every county in the state of Utah on the ballot that fall approved it. It wasn't even close. All that is to say, voters wanted this to happen. You know who didn't? The legislature. And that brings us to today. In between now and then, what happened is the legislature let the independent committee do its work. Members of the committee were all across the board politically. There were people like former Congressman Rob Bishop working with the research side of things on the committee, former State Senator Lal Hilliard. There were members of the public not affiliated or elected to elected office in any way. There were statisticians, experts in fair redistricting. Redistricting itself is constitutionally mandated both at the federal and state level every 10 years. And the goal of redistricting is to draw political boundaries for state, House, and Senate seats, school board districts, congressional districts for federal representation in a way that, as much as possible, keeps like communities together so they're represented in a way that reflects the community overall. I mean, obviously, you can't make it perfect. But also, you have to draw those political boundaries because there have to be districts, right? So every 10 years, constitutional mandate to reassess this in every state and pass new maps. Sometimes great change, sometimes very little change. In Utah, there's been a history of gerrymandering, which is when politicians draw the boundaries in a way that benefits them, not necessarily their voters. Utah in 2000 was actually highlighted by the Wall Street Journal as the most gerrymandered map of the redistricting process that year. Not a positive headline to have written about your state. Then in 2010, they did it again, crafted a 4th congressional district and carved Salt Lake City, the blue part of the state, up into a pie, rather than what made sense to everyone, having a congressional district there with Salt Lake County, and that population would have made a single district. It was referred to as the donut hole map. That was the public preference and also the common sense way to go about it. But what lawmakers didn't like about that is it would have sent a Democrat to Congress from Utah. So instead, they carved Salt Lake City into a pie, separated Salt Lake City out and Salt Lake County into 4 different. There's a point on a corner in Salt Lake where you can walk around the intersection, walk through every crosswalk, and be in 4 congressional districts in Salt Lake City. That's ridiculous. And everyone agreed. So the response was Prop 4, and voters loved it. It was approved on the ballot, and then the legislature let the committee do its work in 2020, the next redistricting cycle, and then they just ignored the maps, kind of laughed at the committee, pulled their own map out from under the couch cushions that they obviously had drawn way in advance, and voted and passed it. It carved Salt Lake City up even more. It assured a Republican would win the 4th congressional district, that donut hole that never ended up existing because they went with the wagon wheel. All this is, so there are 2 schools of thought on gerrymandering. Spoils of war, winner to the winner go, that's fine. And to be honest with you, when it comes to redistricting, for me personally, it's hard to get super upset about it. But at the same time, it is indirect violation of what the Constitution says redistricting is supposed to be about, and that alone should be offensive. Lawmakers have defended it and their actions, saying, the state constitution says they are the ones to decide, which is true. It does. But a lawsuit was filed by the Better Boundaries organization, the League of Women Voters, Mormon Women for Ethical Government, saying, look, if voters are going to do all this work to take advantage of a constitutionally allowed process by the state constitution, it is legal for voters through the ballot initiative process to make law. And if the Constitution says voters can do that as a check on an unresponsive state legislature, which they've done on medical marijuana, Medicaid expansion, the redistricting that we've been talking about, when they felt lawmakers weren't listening, they ran a ballot initiative, and if it passed and was approved by voters, it became law. Well, in this case, they just ignored it, lawmakers. And so this coalition of groups that backed the initiative sued, and they won. And that's where things got ugly. That was this summer in July. The 3rd District Court judge ruled that, the state constitution says if voters have this avenue, if you don't like the initiative process, lawmakers, you need to change the Constitution to eliminate it. You can't just ignore voters if they use this legal mechanism. You can't just ignore it. Well, the reaction from the legislature, Stuart Adams, Senate president, in a press release this summer called it chaos. I'm not kidding, not exaggerating. That's literally what he said. Mike Schultz, Speaker of the House, had a similar over-the-top reaction. The response from the public was basically, no, this is a check, just like you have checks in the executive branch against the legislative branch against the judiciary. The point of checks and the ballot initiative by state constitution is there as well. The point of checks is to keep the system healthy. If one branch is ignoring all the others, you've got problems. And so they won. Judge said, or the state Supreme Court, rather, in this case, said, you can't just ignore voters. If you don't like ballot initiatives, ask voters to change the Constitution and eliminate that option. That's fair. But you can't just ignore ballot initiatives like you did with the redistricting Prop 4. So lawmakers just verklempt over how dare the courts. They held an emergency session several weeks ago. In this emergency session, there wasn't enough time to meet their own statute on how changes like this being made before an election date. And so they changed the deadline for when a ballot initiative or when a constitutional amendment language can be added to the ballot ahead of an election. They had this emergency session. They voted on it. No one had seen the bill or the language until 24 hours before the session. This emergency session. It happened on a Wednesday. The bill was made public on Tuesday, and that breaks some rules too. They ignored that. They voted on it. They passed it. And then because of a change that lawmakers had made back in the general session, the regular session earlier this year, instead of a nonpartisan group of lawyers writing the ballot language, which has always been the case here in Utah, that power was given to the Senate president and the Speaker of the House. And what they did is they messed up, to be honest with you. Their egos got the best of them, and they wrote some extremely dishonest, recognizing, obviously, that what they were trying to do would not be publicly popular. They wrote ballot language that was extremely dishonest. In fact, in the ballot language they wrote, it claims that amending the Constitution in the way lawmakers were asking voters to do with what was known as Amendment D, you would actually protect and reinforce the citizen-driven ballot initiative process. Nothing could have been further from the truth, and everyone was quick to spot that. Well, a lawsuit was filed again by the same groups, League of Women Voters and Mormon Women for Ethical Government, with Better Boundaries signing on as an amicus supporter of the lawsuit, and they won again. 3rd District Court judge said, yeah, you can't lie to voters. I'm paraphrasing, but barely. That's what she said. She said, voters have to know what they're voting on. And your language, Stuart and Mike, what you've written here, doesn't tell them what they're voting on. How can they make an educated and informed vote in that case? The state appealed, and today The arguments were heard by attorneys for League of Women Voters and Mormon Women for Ethical Government, with, again, Better Boundaries signing on as an amicus supporter, and the state. What was said before the Supreme Court today and the judges in response was pretty exciting. I took notes. I felt like a college student. I'll read from those notes, let you know what was said right after this.
News Talk 610 AM, 102.1 FM, KVNU.
Hi, John Weiss here. Fall is such a beautiful but busy time of year. Whether you're juggling fall sports schedules, hitting the trails to hunt, or coordinating the annual tailgate, you need a vehicle that can do it all. During our Ram Power Days, you'll get $2,000 total bonus cash allowance when you purchase a brand new 2024 Ram heavy-duty tradesman truck. See dealership for details. This season, find a reliable ride at Heritage Auto, your hometown dealer with the biggest deals.
Does your dryer take longer to dry your clothes? It might be time to clean your dryer vent. Having a clean dryer vent shortens your drying time, increases the lifespan of your dryer, and decreases your risk of a house fire. Call a Logan-based business, The Duct Hunter, at 435-770-4813 for a quote and to schedule an appointment.
We are the Duct Hunter. Breathe better, save money, protect your home. We are the Duct Hunter.
If I could be you.
And you could be me?
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way.
To get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
All right, dads, let's test your knowledge. Ready? What does this sound? Some of the more experienced parents recognize it as the sound a young teenager makes when he's done something he regrets. Listen. Kind of a sad sound, isn't it? But if you recognized it, then you know exactly what to do. Listen, because that's when together you can both figure out how not to make the same mistake again.
This message from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
You've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. You have to carefully monitor your health for the rest of your life. And you have an increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease.
Cut. Take two. Action.
You've been diagnosed with a new purpose, to fight for the amazing life you made for yourself. To look that risk of heart disease square in the face and say, no, not me. You've been given a new opportunity to live. Get started at NoDiabetesByHeart.org.
On the next Handle on the Law.
Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, hold on. I'm a disabled American veteran, and I went to a place of business.
Thanks for your service, for starters. Okay, I'm sorry I just interrupted you.
Thank you. Vehicle, and I was denied access to the parking lot because
Robert,
they only had stairs. There was no accommodation for me to get up to look at the cars.
Robert, I don't know what's going on here. You have to start from the beginning. As soon as I started thanking you for your service, you kept on going. I was talking and you were talking, just like what's happening now.
It's Handle on the Law, Saturdays from 1 to 4 on News Talk KVNU, the voice of Northern Utah.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. If you're just tuning in, I'm not going to go through that whole setup that I just did, kind of from start to finish, going from the signature gathering for Prop 4 years ago to its passage on the ballot, to the legislature ignoring the independent redistricting process, to the lawsuit against them ignoring it, the judge ruling in favor of those who sued, the legislature, how don't they know who we are? So upset about that. They had an emergency session, asked and approved a constitutional amendment proposal asking us to change the constitution of the state to give up that power. And then they had the gall to write ballot language, which they now have the power to do themselves after a change earlier in the session earlier this year. Stuart Adams and Mike Schultz, Speaker of the House and Senate President respectively, wrote some very dishonest language. A judge agreed and said, Amendment D is moot. It'll be on the ballot. Too late to cancel it being on the ballot. Ballots were already being printed when all of this happened. But any votes for or against won't be tabulated or counted. Legislature will have to go back to the drawing board and bring this up again in 2 years if they want to. Well, the lawmakers were upset again. Don't you know how dare someone check their power? How dare someone remind them that they work for the people? And it went to the Supreme Court today. So there you go. There's my very quick recap after the more detailed, lengthy one earlier. So here is what was said to the state Supreme Court today in appeal. The state, again, appealing the decision of a third district court judge who basically said, yeah, you can't lie to voters with ballot language. If they don't know what they're voting on, they can't have an informed vote. So you've got to be honest, which I think is, kind of a bare minimum requirement, don't you think? Anyway, so here's what was said during the Supreme Court arguments today. A man named Meehan arguing for the state, a man named Mark Garber arguing for the League of Women Voters on Amendment D. And the question again was, should it be invalidated? A lower court judge said Amendment D question on the ballot about amending the Constitution, as lawmakers would like us to do, is moot because lawmakers wrote dishonest ballot language. There was another issue in all of this as well, and that was that the rush of lawmakers doing this, they broke some rules. The rules are that an amendment must be made publicly available and printed in newspapers. The Constitution actually says that no less than 60 days before the election. And the state didn't have time to do that. So the state argued today, as they did in the circuit court a couple of weeks ago. Taylor Meehan, representing the state, argued that, look, it's the digital age. Printing in newspapers shouldn't really be the decisive factor on whether we met that constitutional requirement or not. The link was posted on the legislative website, which frankly is a ridiculous argument, and the judges seem to agree. Meehan said the publication principle in Article 23 is about notice, not the application of when the Constitution was ratified in 1895, meaning, what he's saying that his printed newspapers at the time were all anyone had really in 1895. And he said that's outdated, and posting it on the legislative website via a link people could download was enough. He also argued that this is already being discussed in columns and news sites. We discussed it here on the radio. That was actually mentioned today that it was discussed here on KVNU, and they said, that meets the constitutional requirement. Meehan said he asked the judges, the justices, of the Supreme Court, what is the legislature's role in publishing the amendment? The Constitution says cause to be published. The legislature caused it by directing the lieutenant governor after the vote in this emergency session to publish it and by posting the text on the legislative website. Meehan said hyperlinking the article is actually better than publishing the text, and that was his argument. Justice Pullman, though, seems skeptical. Says the Constitution is very specific in this instruction list. And Pullman kept going back to this part of the state constitution that says the legislature shall provide notice, not just publish, but provide notice. Pullman says, what's the state's opinion on how we as justices are supposed to read that? He went on about, again, times changing and how people get their news now. And Pullman interrupted and said, newspapers still exist. Radio still exists. People get their news on social media now. None of this is brand new this year. But it's clear, that Pullman said, the founders had a point. When they wrote the state constitution, they wanted this in the people's laps and faces for at least 2 months, because we're talking about something serious here, permanently amending the state constitution. And Pullman said, I feel like the state is asking us to overlook this language. Taylor Meehan, the attorney representing the state, started to stumble at that point. And things, back and forth ensued. Justice Peterson said, how does evolving technology imply in any way that we should interpret the intent of the Constitution of the state differently? Meehan didn't really have an answer for that as well. Up next, this went on for quite some time, and the justices, including Justice Pierce said it outright. He said, look, the framers were very specific, and you're asking us to interpret it as vague. That's not a good sign when a Supreme Court justice says that to you. And Meehan, I think, started to realize that. And to be honest, this poor guy, I think, went in knowing he's kind of it would be a big surprise if the state Supreme Court disagreed with the lower court's ruling, especially on this part. And again, this is just half of the argument that was made today. As for Garber, what he had to say, he said, this is. He said he agreed with the court that the justice or the framers of the state constitution, the founders, were very specific, and they were for a reason. He said, the reason they did this is that we're talking about amending the state constitution, and people have a right to think it over. And so this idea of it being published on the state website is not enough. He said the language wasn't available on the state website. There was literally just a bill file posted 60 days in advance. The language itself wasn't posted until 57 days in advance. So that's where things kind of broke down for the state. On the other side of the news, though, where things got really interesting is when they started talking about what the lower court had deemed deceptive language written by the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, basically meant to fool voters into saying yes to Amendment D, and an argument made today that they've done the same with Amendment A, which will appear on your ballot as well. And the discussion at that point was, should the state be in the business of trying to convince voters to do what they want via ballot language, or is their job to spell it out honestly and then campaign like anyone else would to convince voters to do what they want? That part got really interesting. Again, I took notes today. This was arguments made before the state Supreme Court in an appeal over a lower court's ruling that Amendment D is moot. A lower court judge saying lawmakers broke the rules as far as the 60-day notice goes with this emergency session and proposal to amend the Constitution with Amendment D. And lower court said they misled voters with the ballot language they wrote. So that was appealed to the state Supreme Court, and arguments were made today. On the other side, when it got to the were lawmakers dishonest with voters part, there were fireworks. That's next after this look at the news with KVNU's Will Feel Right.
Well, thank you, Jason. The news this hour is brought to you by Bell Medical. A 32-year-old woman has been arrested after her 4-month-old son was found critically injured and later died yesterday morning. Police with the Utah County Sheriff's Office said they responded to a home at around 3 a.m. yesterday morning in Eagle Mountain on report of a 4-month-old who was bleeding from his ear and had a swollen head. Now, paramedics began treating the child before a light flight helicopter took the baby to Primary Children's in Lehi. They initially planned to take the child to Primary Children's in Salt Lake City, but his condition worsened during the ride. Now, after taking him to the hospital, police said his injuries were too severe and he passed away. Rayona Dorothy Mora was arrested and held without bail, according to police. They said the baby's injuries were inconsistent with what Mora described that had happened. Now, a probable cause statement said that Mora claimed that she was sleeping on the bed while holding the baby and had fallen on top of him. The statement said the doctors told police the injuries on the boy could have not been caused by what Mora told police. Police reported that the baby had multiple skull fractures, which doctors told police was unsurvivable. Well, volunteers spent much of the day yesterday helping to get pet food donations to Utah community members in need. Heidi Cannella, who is communications director for the Utah Food Bank, said that people are facing a rise in housing costs along with inflation, family budgets becoming tighter, and that's leaving some to consider whether or not they can keep their beloved furry friends. Now, the Utah Food Bank teamed up with the PetSmart Charities along with a pet food manufacturer to donate around 8,000 pounds of animal food. About 30 million pet homes suffer from food insecurity, according to Brad Teasley, who's general manager of Alphia. Now, the Utah Food Bank is always taking food donations, both for humans and for pets. And the next time you go with your family to get a bucket of fried chicken, you could do so at the world's first KFC franchise that's located in Salt Lake City. Now, according to the Sanders Cafe Museum, back on September 24th, 1952, Colonel Sanders himself recognized the potential of the restaurant franchising concept and helped open the first KFC in South Salt Lake. But the colonel didn't take on the franchise venture alone. Deseret News reports that an acquaintance of Sanders, Leon Pete Harmon, had agreed to let him sell his chicken out of the Harmon Cafe that was located on South State Street. Now, Harmon is credited with creating the iconic paper bucket that would be the 14 pieces of chicken would be placed in, along with mashed potatoes, rolls, and gravy, all for $3.50 back then. But still, the restaurant struggled to keep up with the demand for chicken. And fast forward now, 72 years later, KFC operates over 24,000 restaurants worldwide in more than 145 countries. That original KFC in South Salt Lake was remodeled back in 2004, but is still there, but has been remodeled and turned into a part restaurant and part museum. Get more on these and other stories at CashValleyDaily.com. And for Bill Walter, I'm Will Feelright with your KVNU News Update.
ABC News, I'm Daria Albinger. A stopgap funding bill to avert a government shutdown at the end of the month is headed to President Biden's desk. The legislation will keep the lights on until December 20th. Lawmakers will now head out of town until after the election. With just 41 days to the vote, Vice President Harris and former President Trump are focused today on the economy. Governor Ron DeSantis is telling Florida residents in the path of Hurricane Helene to leave now.
You have time today to do what you need to do. Once it gets tonight into tomorrow, you're going to be out of time. So make these decisions now. Execute your plan.
The storm is expected to make landfall tomorrow night in the Big Bend area, a Category 4 storm with a possible 20-foot storm surge. President Biden's expected to announce a new package of military aid to Ukraine when he meets with President Zelensky at the White House tomorrow. This is ABC News.
Get your furnace fixed, call Gary Riggs. Get your furnace fixed, call Gary Riggs. If you're having heating trouble and you need your furnace fixed, just pick up the phone and call Gary Riggs. 435-512-6633 will come to you. Our service fee is low, just $25. We repair all brands and have certified installers. Get your furnace fixed, call Gary Riggs. Get your furnace fixed, call Gary Riggs.
Are you in need of excellent surgical care? Budge Clinic General Surgery offers the future of surgery with state-of-the-art robotic-assisted procedures. From cancer treatments to surgical needs, they've got you covered. Call Budge Clinic General Surgery today, 435-716-1950, to schedule a consultation and experience the best possible outcome. Trust Doctors Anderson, Marshall, McKenna, and Peterson, the experts at Budge Clinic General Surgery, helping people live the healthiest lives possible.
Even though the weather's grown colder, you still have time to have your fruit trees pruned. Logan Extermination says your trees need to be trimmed back in order to achieve success next year. And this is the first step to a bountiful harvest. However, you could do more bad than good if you don't know what you're doing. Save the headache and call Logan Extermination today and get a jump on tree pruning. Prices will vary depending on your needs. Logan Extermination, 752-8450.
Sleep apnea is a common disorder and is linked to serious health problems, such as a risk of high blood pressure, heart attack, and stroke. With the proper information, you can find a restful night's sleep and a healthier life.
Learn more at wakeuptosleep.org or call 877-389-8868.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance, reminding you that when you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Running through my notes today, I had an opportunity to tune in. It's a media representative to the appeal, oral arguments in the appeal before the state Supreme Court today This appeal launched by the state against a lower court's ruling a couple of weeks ago that Amendment D, which will appear on your ballot, is moot, meaning anyone who votes for or against it, that's fine. The votes won't be tabulated or counted. If lawmakers still want to amend the Constitution in their favor like this, they'll have to take a second stab at it in 2026. Lawmakers very upset about this because remember, we got to Amendment D because they were very upset in the first place that a court had told them they couldn't ignore voters when it came to ballot initiatives. That's what got us here today. So lawmakers, after the state Supreme Court said, no, you can't just ignore voters when they approve a ballot initiative. The Constitution says that is part of making law. You have the governor's office, the executive branch, you have, which includes the attorney general's office. You have the judiciary, which is the state Supreme Court, the circuit courts, all of that. And then you have the legislative branch. And then in the Constitution, it clearly says you have this other mechanism for making law in Utah, which is voters collecting signatures to get something on the ballot and then voters approving or denying on the ballot a proposed law. That is the fourth way law and policy can be made in Utah. And lawmakers, the judge said in that lower court, if they don't like that, amend the Constitution. But you can't just ignore voters if a ballot initiative is approved, which is a great argument because, no, you really shouldn't. But because, again, remember, to get a ballot initiative approved here in Utah is very hard. And I like that. In states where it's easy, Oregon, for example, you only need, I think, 6% of the total vote in the last gubernatorial election to get an initiative on the ballot. That is far too easy. And Oregon is struggling with the results of that. Direct democracy sounds great, but it doesn't really work well. I like the elected representative system that we have, but there are times when you need a check on a legislative body, especially one like ours, which is consolidated power from the governor's office. They've consolidated power from the AG's office. They are trying now to consolidate power from the judiciary. The legislature is too powerful here in Utah. So the ballot initiative process is one of the last remaining checks that really exists in Utah now that things are kind of imbalanced thanks to the legislature. So to just ignore it, a judge said, is wrong. Lawmakers could not believe their ears. How dare this judge? And so they had an emergency session, broke the law, changed the law when they found out they were breaking the law, and then approved a constitutional amendment D, which asks voters to basically give them permission to ignore them through when the ballot initiative happens. Where things got troublesome for the legislature is that due to a change made by the legislature earlier this year in the general session, instead of a nonpartisan group of attorneys writing the ballot language, which has always been the case until this year, lawmakers during the session, I missed this, I didn't see this happen, they gave themselves the power. Specifically, they gave the Speaker of the House, Mike Schultz in this case, and Senate President, at this time Stuart Adams, they gave themselves the power to write the actual language that would appear on the ballot, and they couldn't help themselves. They got over their skis. And a circuit court judge, when that was challenged in court, said, you can't lie to voters, man. Get real. Voters have to know what they're voting on in order to cast an informed vote. And your language is not accurate. It's deceptive. And so she said, lower court judge and a circuit court judge, I think it was third district court, not circuit, sorry. Third district court judge said, Amendment D is moot. It'll still be on the ballot because all this happened in such a rushed way. It's too late to, the ballots have already been printed when they were doing this. So it's way too late now to remove Amendment D from the ballot so it won't appear. But anyone who votes for it or against it, if they want to, it'll make you feel better. That's great. It won't count. That won't be tabulated by the lieutenant governor's office, according to this court ruling. Well, the state, of course, appealed that to the state Supreme Court, and today oral arguments were made. I took notes. I got a chance to listen via the media feed and from my notes. So earlier, before the news, I talked about one part of this lawsuit, which is that the lawsuit says lawmakers, they didn't adhere to statute on public notice, which requires 60 days before Election Day in the case of a constitutional amendment. Because remember, a constitutional amendment is likely permanent change. And so if you're asking voters to amend the Constitution, they need to be able to read the actual language 60 days before the Election Day. Well, That didn't happen. They also didn't publicize it the way the Constitution mandates. The state argued, again, that they posted a link on the legislative website, and that's how everybody gets their news now, is clicking links. Weak argument. The judges obviously felt the same today. The second part of this is the language itself. Was it deceptive? Was it dishonest? And what does that mean as far as how the state Supreme Court might rule on this? The argument made, again, you had Taylor Meehan arguing for the state, an attorney, and you had Mark Garber arguing for the League of Women Voters and Mormon Women for Ethical Government in this lawsuit. And this was the appeal portion today before the Supreme Court, the state launching the appeal after the Third Circuit or Third District ruled against the state. So that brings us to today in these arguments. You'll notice I'm not quoting from Garber a lot, the one representing League of Women Voters and Mormon Women for Ethical Government. And the reason for that is that his argument was never very different than what the justices were saying themselves, which is a bad sign for the state. That usually is a sign that you are on thin ice with your own argument. But that's not always the case, and the Supreme Court might surprise us and overturn the third District Court's ruling. I doubt it. Anyway, here's what was said today. I thought this part really stood out from me. Justice Hagan, on the second part of this lawsuit, basically saying, that this would be, so the state's arguing it would be unprecedented for a court to invalidate the legislative process like this. The justices kind of responded in their line of questioning, at least, that voters again have to know what they're voting on, to say yes or no in an informed way. They have to know what the actual constitutional change would mean. And that's where things kind of got messy for the state. They referred to this as the state putting their thumb on the scale, lawmakers specifically in this case. Justice Peterson, for example, asked a very simple question of the state's attorney today. Shouldn't people know what the amendment actually does? To which Meehan responded, I think they will know. It's been hard to tell the other side of the story, and you can't rely on the summary alone, ever. Voters will get educated before Election Day. Pullman said, so the legislature, through the ballot language, can put its thumb on the scale, and you're saying to us that's okay? Meehan said, well, it would be unprecedented to invalidate the legislature's decision unless questioned to the contrary to the amendment itself. And Peterson responded, so is that a yes? You're saying the state can advocate through the actual ballot summary language? Meehan said, well, it can't be untrue. There was this long, awkward silence at that point. And finally, Justice Pullman said, can the state insert subjective views about the amendment as being good or bad in the actual ballot language, in your opinion, here representing the state today? Here in this language, they clearly express a positive description of the ballot or the ballot change or the constitutional amendment itself. Should the state be doing that? Meehan said it's not unconstitutional. I might perhaps, as an attorney, call it unwise. Again, this long, awkward silence at that point. The justice is speechless a couple of times until Justice Meehan finally recognizes how awkward the silence is, and he starts talking again. He says, we shouldn't presume that voters are only getting their information from the ballot. They'll get the voter pamphlet, too, the informational pamphlet. To which Justice Peterson jumped in and said, so you're saying lawmakers can write deceptive language on the ballot, but then the informational pamphlet that comes out will tell voters, well, that ballot language might be deceptive. You should really Google this. At that point, there were chuckles in the courtroom. This was going very poorly for the state at this point. Finally, it went on like this. It was nearly 3 hours total. And finally, in the end, Meehan said, Pullman said, Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution says provisions are mandatory unless stated otherwise. Do we have example where substantial compliance is adequate? Taking it back to the question of did they notify the public in time? By the way, substantial compliance is actually a legal term. I learned that today. And it means, okay, you didn't follow the letter of the law, but you followed the intent, and so you're good. And so the final question from Justice Pullman for the state's attorney today, citing the Constitution and this mandatory publication and publicizing of any constitutional amendment proposal, Justice asked again, do we have examples where substantial compliance is adequate? Meehan cited some similar cases in other states. Pullman interrupted and said, in Utah, to which Meehan said, no, there are no examples that I have in Utah where getting close enough on the notification requirement held up in court. At that point, they moved on to Garber. And again, Garber basically just reiterated what the justices had already kind of highlighted with their questioning. It did not go well for the state today. Again, there's a chance the Supreme Court overturns the third district ruling against the Senate president and Speaker in the House's ballot language and the timing of all this being too rushed. I think it's unlikely, but we probably won't know until early next week at the soonest. So there you have it, my rough recap from my own notes of arguments made by the state and litigants, League of Women Voters and Mormon Women for the Ethical Government, with amicus support from Better Boundaries, squaring off ahead of justices who peppered them with questions for 3 hours today in this appeal hearing. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. We'll be back right after this.
This is Jay with Daryl's Appliance. Here are the top 3 reasons to buy from Daryl's. Number 1, Daryl's has the best pricing and Save More with exclusive mail-in rebates up to $600 extra. Number 2, introducing a 2-year parts and labor warranty on all appliances when delivered and installed by us. That's security. Number 3, if something goes wrong, Daryl's factory-trained in-house techs service everything we sell. From the service to the sale, an installed Daryl's Appliance does it all. Daryl's, west on Airport Road, open until 6 p.m. on weekdays, 5 on Saturday.
This is Dr. Red, chiropractic physician with Red River Health and Wellness. Are you suffering with fatigue, brain fog, headaches, intestinal issues, weight gain, and you haven't been able to find any answers?
Before I started at Red River, I was having a lot of stomach pain. I was overweight, severe anxiety, some depression. I had been to multiple doctors. I'd been to specialists. We had done tests, and no one could find anything that was wrong.
Red River Health and Wellness can help you.
I'm on anxiety medicine. I've lowered my dose, and I'm working with my doctor to continue to lower it. I'm sleeping through the night. I have energy for my kids. I've lost 30 pounds. I just feel really good.
Our goal is to teach you and educate you so you know how to manage your condition a lot more effectively, and you know what to do and what not to do for the rest of your life.
Schedule your appointment today at 855-55-RIVER. Red River Health and Wellness with offices in Logan, South Jordan, Springville, and St. George.
Call Red River today.
I was told that I wasn't to say anything unless I was asked about it secretly. That I should keep anything I'm feeling inside buried extra deep.
Hey, this is Grace Gosted. I'm a singer-songwriter, and like many, I've been traumatized by years of bullying. You're ugly, you're stupid, you're gay, you're worthless. I've felt fear, humiliation, and shame. Bullying causes real harm and can result in severe long-term depression, anxiety, addiction, and even self-harm. I created the Black Box Project for anyone who has ever felt different for any reason. So what are you hiding? What are you feeling? Go to theblackboxproject.org to hear from me, a mental health expert, and find resources to help you take the first step on the road to healing. Again, go to theblackboxproject.org. You are not alone.
Hello?
Man, where are you? I thought you were coming.
I can't. I'm in bed with the flu.
The flu? Whoa. Grandma's about to crowd surf. Man, I'll call you back.
Don't get stuck at home with the flu. A flu shot is safe, effective, and you can get it at the same time as your COVID-19 vaccine. A flu shot is the best way to prevent the flu and its potentially serious complications. Don't get flu FOMO. Learn more at getmyflushot.org.
Brought to you by the AMA, CDC, and the Ad Council.
Text and whatever. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to KVN News for the People, wrapping up today's show with something kind of lighthearted. Listener requested this several months ago, and I've tried to do it every day. And since we've been talking court arguments all hour, you probably need something a little more entertaining, I guess, to go about your night with. Although this is important, it is still court arguments, so a little heavy. Here's something lighter for you. We'll wrap up today with just a bit of trivia. I actually didn't know this, but you've all heard of and used, I assume, a crescent wrench. These days, always spelled, AP Style Book even spells it this way, with a small c, crescent wrench. And everyone assumes, I think, as I did, this is a nod to the kind of crescent-shaped jaw of the tool. Not the case. The crescent wrench is actually the capital C crescent wrench. It was not a colloquial term. It was actually at one point a brand name for an adjustable wrench invented by Swedish immigrant Carl Peterson and originally brought to the U.S. market in the 1900s. His innovation was a simple one. Rather than force mechanics to have a complete set of wrenches for every different size, Crescent, the Crescent brand name, allowed them to quickly adjust, and it caught on very quickly, was very popular, and Peterson's originally opened his business in Jamestown, New York, and this is all he sold was a wrench. So there you have it. And while Crescent is the most well-known of its type, it actually wasn't the first in the world. Adjustable wrenches of various designs actually dated back to 1800s, and Crescent, the way he got popular was by inventing the first crescent wrench that had a jaw that didn't slip quite as easily. And that's why it caught on and was finally adopted by mechanics all around the globe. But today it's the small c crescent wrench, but at a time it was the capital C Crescent brand name wrench. There's your trivia for the day. Hope you've enjoyed. We'll be back tomorrow with more of KVN News for the People, but Dave Ramsey is next here on KVNU Logan.